great discussion is going to happen. Senator Russ Ingalls, City Manager Jonathan Delabrea. We have our, I'm introducing you again. We have our council members, Rebecca Chase. We have the president of our council, Chris Vachon. We have Council Member Charbonneau, thank you so very much. And we have Representative Marcotte here with us. The way it's going to work is we're going to ask you to take some cards and then write down any questions that you might have for the various speakers. And then we will read those questions, and then whoever on the panel would like to answer those questions may. We have specific questions. I'm going to introduce the treasurer in a minute. We have our Northeast Kingdom International Airport Task Force members here as well. And we have our NCCD, and they always change the, I never get the word right. We have Dave LaForce here. We also have one of our council members, Rebecca Chase, who will also jump back and forth and change his hats. But most important, okay, we have our lead speaker here today, and thank you for doing this. We have our treasurer, Mike Pichek. So I'm going to ask Senator Russ Ingalls to grab a mic down there. I'm going to ask City Manager to run around and grab any cards if you have any questions. And I'm going to give you, Mr. Treasurer, the mic. So thank you. Let's give him a warm welcome.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. Thank you to Mayor Sullivan for having me. I really appreciate it. It's good to see her continuing her community and public service up here in the Northeast Kingdom. So look forward to seeing what you'll be able to do here for the city of Newport. And again, really excited to be here with you all. I'm Mike Pichek. I'm the state treasurer for the state of Vermont. Maybe a little bit of background about myself. I grew up in Brattleboro. I live now in Winooski, and I've lived in Winooski now for the last 10 years. But I got into public service about 10 years ago, really from the example that my parents set for me, both my mom and my dad. They were not in politics, they weren't political, but they were very community oriented and very community service minded. My dad is a business owner. He owns a small business. He always instilled in me the value of supporting small businesses in your community. When I was a kid, we had to go have dinner and have breakfast and lunch at the diner in town that I didn't really like, but we had to go there because it was a client of his. And even though the silverware was dirty and the food wasn't that great, that was where we went to breakfast on Saturday morning. And he was also very, from his time standpoint, very involved in the community, helping bring a teen center to town, helping expand the lights of the football fields. We've got Friday night football games, helping expand the golf course. And I asked him why he was so involved in the community. It took him away from his business and his family. And he said that, Brattleboro had done so much for him that it was the least he could do to give back in those ways. And that's something that really stuck with me, and I've tried to, lead with that kind of example, giving back to the broader Vermont community. And my mom, very similarly, when she was, just before she was pregnant with me, founded a soup kitchen in Brattleboro called St. Bridget's Kitchen. And she just retired a month ago. And she actually had an article in the Vermont Digger today about her, so that was very nice to see. But she'd been a volunteer for 40 years at St. Bridget's Kitchen and working with some of the most vulnerable people in our community. Again, she really instilled in me that importance of making sure everybody's voice is heard, that everybody has value, that everyone counts. It's being patient and being kind and living your life through those values. And again, something that instilled in me. And their work in the community, again, is what sort of drove me to wanting to get involved in public service. So I ran for treasurer 2 years ago, and in the time that we've been in office, we've really been trying to focus on what I call financial equity. Financial equity is trying to build more opportunity into our economy for everybody. And there's certainly 3 ways that we've been working on financial equity. One is through housing. I see housing as our number 1, 2, and 3 issue across the state of Vermont. I'd be interested to hear how the housing issue is here in Newport. But one of the things that we did was expand this program that allows us to invest the state's balance sheet into economic development. It's called the 10% in Vermont program, and we expanded it by about $80 or $85 million. And the number one purpose we put on that money was low-cost capital for housing, low-interest loans for housing. And we've deployed about $65 million, including some here in Newport through Rural Edge to support their development up in the old Catholic convent. So with that money, we're putting it out at a really low interest rate at a time where interest rates are really high, and otherwise projects would stall because the interest rates are high. But because we're putting it out at a low interest rate, projects are able to continue to go forward. We're going to be supporting throughout the state about 1,100 new units of housing through that program. So we're really excited about that. It's senior housing, which I think is really important for Vermont strategically to be thinking about over the next decade, because it's not just building the homes that the seniors will move into, but it's also the homes that get freed up when seniors move out of their home that maybe has more bedrooms than they need and is larger than they need. So senior housing, affordable housing, market rate housing for employees, really all across the board, which has been great. Another thing we've been focused on with the legislature's help, both Representative Mark Cotton and Senator Ingalls, is Vermont Saves, which is this program that's publicly administered. It's going to be administered by our office, but it's going to provide retirement access to about 88,000 working Vermonters who have never had access to retirement through their employer before. And it's free of cost to the employer. The employee is automatically opted into this program. A Roth IRA will automatically be set up for them. They will automatically start saving toward their future. Their monies will automatically be invested and start growing and getting compounding investment returns. And that's a big deal. These 88,000 Vermont workers that haven't had access to retirement before, largely younger, largely more male, female than male, lower wage earners, less educated, more BIPOC by percentage. So it's the exact kind of population we want to try to help and support. And that's a program that's going to go live by the end of the year. We have announced that we're partnering with the state of Colorado to help us set that program up even more quickly and even more cost effectively. So we're really excited about that. It's called Vermont Saves, and you'll hear a lot more about it in the fall as we start to ramp up that program. And the last thing I want to talk about is this idea that we presented to the legislature called baby bonds. And the idea of baby bonds is that we would try to facilitate individuals born into poverty to have some capital so that they could invest in their future and invest in Vermont. So the idea behind baby bonds is that every child born into poverty would have $3,200 set aside for them that the Treasurer's Office would invest, and that would grow over time. And then between the ages of 18 and 30, they could claim their baby bond for the purposes of buying a home in Vermont, starting a business in Vermont, for higher education, or for retirement security. So they could use it for those 4 purposes. By the time that they turn 18, it would grow to about $12,000. By the time they're 30, if they live till 30, it would be about $24,000. And why are we doing this? It's really 3 principal policy aims. It's trying to break the cycle of generational poverty, because it's so hard to get out of poverty when you are in poverty, particularly when it's generational, and you have no one there to help you and give you a hand up. So this is an idea that would do exactly that. It's also rural economic development, because in Vermont, most of our children born onto Medicaid are born in the more rural parts of our state, like the Northeast Kingdom. And in Essex County, for example, there are about 30 babies every year born on Medicaid, and only about 50 or 55 babies born every year in that county. So the majority of babies born in Caledonia and Orleans and in Essex are born on Medicaid. So this would really disproportionately benefit places like the Northeast Kingdom and reinvesting in our rural communities and directly in individuals. And then the last one is just retention of young people in our state. We have fewer young people in our state because our birth rates have been going down. And we want to try to attract as many as we can to stay in Vermont and be able to afford to stay in Vermont. So again, this would be a program where you have to have been born in Vermont, and then you have to have had stayed in Vermont at the time that you claim your baby bond. And then the uses of the money would tie you to Vermont as well, buying a home, starting a business, going to school, or retirement. So those are some of the things we've been up to the first term as treasurer. I'd be remiss if I didn't also mention our unclaimed property department, which we administer. So we have $120 million of unclaimed property that we hold. That is really, Vermonters' money, individuals, businesses, not-for-profits. The story I'd like to tell, which just happened a few months ago, we were going down to the Putney Town meeting down in southern Vermont, and I had the unclaimed property list with me, and I stopped in to see my dad the night before and said, hey, do you recognize any of these really large claims here? There's one for $38,000. And he said, oh yeah, that person I know, I've been doing his taxes for 40 years. I said, well, can you check in the morning and see what his address is, if it matches up to our database and what the phone number is? And he did that, and it matched up, and I called it the next morning, and his daughter, this person's daughter, answered and said, my dad doesn't talk on the phone very well anymore. He's 97 years old. I got some information that confirmed this was in fact him for $38,000. I said, well, I'm the state treasurer. We have $38,000 for your dad. We're going to send him a check in the mail. We've confirmed who he is now. And I got a note from him, very nice note saying, made Easter so much better. We had everyone there at Easter, and just, much better Easter for all of us. I was able to do a little bit more for everybody than I would have done otherwise. But then I got a note from his daughter a week later or so and said, we didn't know about this money. Thank you for letting us know about it. Now that we have it, my dad can stay in his home for another year because of it. So not everybody has $38,000 certainly, but there is millions and millions of dollars there. I encourage you to check for yourselves, for your family members, for businesses, nonprofits that you might be involved with. There's quite a bit of money in our office. We make it easy to return it to you as well. So Mayor Sullivan, with that, I think I'll turn it back over to you. Huh? Oh.
So Senator Eagleson, I think you got to answer some questions, and here's one as well. So here comes the question. It's all yours.
And thank you, Treasurer, for coming. It's always very nice to have a beneficial comment. I think that Newport's making a real great effort to involve the community and to show that the state is there to support them. And as you can see from the turnout here, people are interested when we hold these events. So we appreciate you coming.
That's great.
The first question is baby bonds. Can the public make donations to the baby bonds program? Not for a relative, but a general donation for the support of the program.
Is that from, I wonder if that's from Representative Markov. Well, I think the answer is hopefully yes. We're working on what we did get passed this year, what we're hoping to get passed this year is both a study that would look into the program a little bit more. There's some questions that legislators had about it. But the other part that's more active is that it would be language for a pilot project that would allow us to collect funds and then design a pilot project. My hope would be that it would be based here in the kingdom for the reasons I said earlier. And that pilot project would be done through philanthropic donations. So once that's set up, if that all works out, then yes, absolutely, people could donate to the pilot project. And we're hoping to get some philanthropic dollars from some national foundations that are really intrigued by this concept. It's a much broader movement than just Vermont.
As the state's aware, we have a project across the road. It's not finished. We've done the E5 program. Is the state willing to step up to make the project across the road? Should we have anybody interested in economically viable so that we can put something there?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's been 8 years, I think, that we've been working on trying to figure out the puzzle pieces of across the street with the federal receiver and with the SEC and all of the parties to bear. And we've made progress, and then we've backslid. We've made progress, we backslid. So, the answer is yes, but we need to work with the receiver, Mike Goldberg. I think right now the big issue is just where the appraisal is on the property, and it's basically Mike has an appraisal, and the Buildings and Grounds, which runs this kind of thing for the state of Vermont, has a much lower appraisal. So at one point we were going to say, why don't we agree on getting a third appraisal, and we'll both agree whatever it is, that would be the price. And that was the last time I was working on it, but we didn't go that direction. So I think the answer is yes, but they got to work through the price.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, of course, you probably know more than I do.
We are in discussions with the receiver. There are people who are his liaisons, and we will eventually have a forum when we get to that point. But there are communications going on regarding that. So just so that you know, it's not just still sitting out there.
Yeah, good. And you know, our program, like the 10% of Vermont program, would be perfect just from our office, let alone broader state support. But, you know, we're investing in projects that are housing, but we're also investing in projects that what we're calling economic impact projects. So there's one in Bennington that they're renovating their old high school that hasn't been used for 20 years, and there'll be like 37 units of housing. There'll be 100 new slots of childcare in the basement. It's going to be a recreational for the town, like a recreation department, a basketball hoop and gymnasium. There'll be a senior site for Meals on Wheels. So that's an investment that we're going to heavily invest in because it's going to be transformative, we believe, to that part of Bennington. So I think the answer is yes. I mean, once the pieces are there, the state, I think, is an eager partner.
I know this is how we began some because it comes before the legislature with questions about the state still taxing military retirement.
Yeah.
And we've had that bill up. I think the governor this year was the first time that he didn't put that bill forward because we've had it put forward. We had that bill. I think last year's session we actually had 17 people willing to sign on to not taxing veteran retirements. We just couldn't get the committee chair to put that bill forward. So it's a little bit out of your hands. Your thoughts on that?
I don't want to embarrass the person, but who asked the question?
Oh, we got a veteran right here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your service.
And he's also the former president of the council.
No, he's not responding to it. Yeah.
Thank you for your service, I was just saying. And you know, whenever that question, so I've been doing, you know, politics now for 2 years, and when that question first started to come up, like 2 years ago, I'd say, yeah, we should do it because we're one of 9 states that doesn't do it. And then someone would correct me and say, that's only 5 now. And then I'd say 5, and someone would correct me and it's like only 3 now. And maybe it's even lower. So we're like one of the only states that does not recognize this in terms of not having the pensions tax.
Can I respond to that?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yes, please.
Because I've been with the governor a few times when he's come up here opening buildings, and he has trouble. And everyone in the world, the response is, there's one senator down there
Yeah,
that keeps blocking it.
I think that's right.
Well, if you've got 29 senators, you've got the Military Affairs Committee, you've got the governor, one man can stop all this. It's really a disgrace. And yet, and 2 weeks from now, and then in November, all you veterans, the retirees are the greatest thing in the world. When I moved here to Vermont, I set up what I thought I would owe Vermont. 2 months, 2 years, up, get a nasty grant from the state saying, we need more tax from you. Everything's been good for 10 years. Now, all of a sudden, this past year, I own $6. But next year, and I'm not making big money, I'm a retiree, Social Security, and we retirees have to go to Cleveland and guesstimate how much more I should have taken out of my retirement pay just to live in this wonderful state of Vermont. And in all honesty, I think it's a bunch of crap that we spend more money down in Australia for everything, but we do not take care of those veterans, and there's not that many in the state.
Yeah.
We'll just stick it to them. And I believe as the numbers go down statewide, Vermont should be proud. We're hanging tough. We're right in there with California. And we don't want to be really like California. And Social Security is another one where this is one of the few states that tax people's Social Security. So as you get a little bit older, welcome to Vermont, their taxes. Something's got to be done down there.
Yeah, no,
It probably ought to be done before it gets fixed.
hopefully not.
Yeah.
And all of your points are well taken. And on the Social Security point, I think on the military pension point too, it's not, these aren't state administrative programs. So when you have to pay tax, you have to withhold and you have to estimate and sometimes you get into trouble with that too. And you know, I've heard stories of individuals that have gone on to Social Security, and then they get not only do they get a bill from the state, but they say, you know, you have a penalty because you haven't been prepaying, and they didn't even know they had to do that.
One last thing, and I'll be quiet. When I was at Fort Dix, New Jersey, I started fighting with the tax department, and I sent them the penalty, and by the time they received it, I got another penalty. This went on for like 3 months. I told my boss at 2 o'clock in the morning, I said, I'm going to Montpelier tomorrow. I drove all the way through from New Jersey. There's a tax commissioner was coming into his office. I'm sitting there in his office. Got it fixed. I got a letter of apology from the tax department. But sure, your deal with money. The military has programs that help everybody with their income taxes. If you go in there and you tell them you're from Vermont, they roll their eyes. They say Vermont is probably the worst and nastiest state to try to do income taxes with.
Yeah, I told my dad's a CPA, right? You know, I've heard stories since I was 2 or 3 years old, but you know, I just want to respond to the point that you made about military pensions, and I'll talk about one other thing that we're working on relative to our state pensions. But in military pensions, you know, it's the right thing to do, like the morally right thing to do. That was the point you made, and I agree with that. But it's also an economic thing to do as well. I mean, people retire from the military when they're quite young. They have a whole nother career ahead of them. Those are the type of individuals that are really well experienced, well trained, you know, that we want to attract and encourage to come to our state. And when you're one of very, very few, it almost feels like a slap in the face as much as anything else, because you know how. But the other thing I want to mention is that with our state pension fund, you know, we have provided military credit for time served for the Vietnam War, for Korea, for World War II, and and then it stopped at Vietnam, and we're looking at, can we build that out and potentially provide military service credit for those that have served in more recent wars. And I think that's another way we can support veterans that have worked for the state of Vermont.
Well, maybe my 30 years weren't in there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I was wondering, Mike, if you could spend a few minutes talking about TIFs and what Newport, or how the state and Newport can work together for TIFs, for economic development and housing.
So do you have a TIF district in Newport City?
No, we're going to address that in a few minutes.
Okay, sweet. So I mentioned I grew up in Brattleboro, but I live in Winooski, and I've lived in Winooski for the last 10 years. And I don't know if Winooski was the first TIF district, but it certainly was the first that gained significant momentum. And I don't know the last time you've been to Winooski or how familiar you are with the city, but you know, it was a big mill town, and the mills closed, and the downtown sort of got a little faded, and you know, there was this plan for economic development, and they ripped down a lot of the buildings, and it didn't come to fruition, and it was really a big parking lot. But they did implement a TIF program. They did spur significant economic development through the creation of just a handful of blocks originally that was mostly housing, but had commercial on the first floor. And those first few units expanded to many, many other buildings. They're finalizing one last piece of property that would be a hotel, a parking garage, and another affordable housing unit, or mixed unit. And they just paid off, the city of Winooski just paid off its last TIF payment in April. So it's hard to look at Winooski and not say it's an economic success story. And you talk to the developers that were there at the time, and they said it would not have happened but for the TIF district and what that spurred in terms of encouraging investment in Winooski. And now that we've paid it off and paid back, you know, we'll be benefiting from a higher tax base for decades to come.
What is the TIF district?
So tax increment financing, it allows you to take a reduction in your grand list and use that to make some investments in your community. So if you're going to build across the street, you might say, you know, we'll remove that from the grand list, and we'll give you a 15-year or 10-year or 20-year pass on your property taxes. But then once it's built, and once that 15-year period has run out, then you have a much more highly valuable piece of property that's going to pay property taxes for. It's much more complicated than what I just described. I think that's the simplest way to describe it.
Baby bonds, where does the money come from?
Yeah, so right now it's a pilot project, so we'd be looking for philanthropic dollars. We had a concept that we proposed to the legislature that, you know, mentioned this unclaimed property money that we have, and despite our best efforts, the amount of money that comes into the state of Vermont goes up every year. It's gone up like 77% in the last decade, so that number keeps going up and up and up. And the claims are flat compared to that. They're going up about 20%. So we're getting a lot more money in than we're able to get out, even though we're doing everything we can to get the money out. So our suggestion was using some of that unclaimed property money to help fund the baby bonds program. There's nothing special about that source of funding. It just really could be any source of funding, but that one, in our estimation, wouldn't require increase in taxes or increase in the budget. It'd basically be shifting a one-time payment to this program, or something that's used as one-time money specifically to this program.
You kind of answered this a little bit, but I'll just go back over and maybe you can add something to it. The question of the housing program. Do only federal funded programs like rural edge qualify for low interest rates, and or would private developers as well?
In our program, you said? So we have an investment policy that says, you know, we have a prioritization, so nonprofits, municipalities, and then private developers. So it's not to suggest that a private developer can't benefit, but you know, they become a lot more tricky questions when it's a private developer, because you're giving them low-cost capital, and you know, what are they going to do with that? What's their margin going to be? How much are they going to earn? So we have generally lent out to organizations that are experts in lending. So the Vermont Housing Finance Agency, the Vermont Economic Development Authority, there's a Northern Forest Center, which has been developing housing. They have a project in St. Johnsbury. So those are the entities we lend to, and then they decide who to lend to after that. So if they do end up lending to a private developer, they will have a lot of conversations around how much are they making off of our money, because that's not the intent to you know, make it. We want to help private developers. We don't want to help them necessarily make a lot of money for themselves. We want them to have, you know, enough to cover their bills and have some return on that. But that's the prioritization: it's nonprofits, municipalities, and then private developers.
Madam Mayor, you had said that you might have some information on TIF while we were on that subject. Is that something you want to talk about now, or do you want to come back to that?
Oh, we're actually going to have a panel discussion on that, so I'm going to let them jump in, and then we can build the questions from there.
Okay. We have, let's see right here. Does the state do much as far as in your office and stuff? I know that in my institutions committee that we do a lot of federal dollars. I think in our bill that we have this year on Senate institutions, the committee that I chair, we have about $60 million of federal, well, we had to match, some of that's 10 to $1, some of that's 14 to $1, and I think we had $6 million in this last little bunch, and that bought $60 million worth of clean water projects and all of that. Does your office handle, the question is, Newport wastewater treatment facilities hitting its need to previous repair date? Any plans to address this issue? And I don't know, it's hard to say, well, that's on our radar, but does the Treasurer's office ever do much as far as for wastewater projects? Yeah,
that's a good question, because of two reasons. One, there's an acute issue right now after the flooding in July. The towns of Johnson Village, I think it was Hardwick, and maybe down in southern Vermont too. There were 3 wastewater facilities that were basically completely damaged from the flooding, and now they have a really significant capital project staring them in the face. But separate from those 3 wastewater facilities, a lot of our wastewater facilities were built, you know, back probably when Newport's was, and they're running toward the end of their useful life. So it's a big issue for us as a state as we go forward. It's similar to our school infrastructure. A lot of our schools were built 50 years ago, and becoming pretty old, and we need to think about what's the future of our schools look like in this other kind of important infrastructure. So the way that we got involved to date, we had a program that we established after the flooding that allowed us to, again, use some low-interest loans to support municipalities that were impacted by the July flooding. That didn't impact Newport, but it did go to about 15 or 16 communities to help them bridge this period of time between when the damage occurred and when the FEMA reimbursement check will come, which could be 6 months, 18 months, 24 months. It's really hard to know. So instead of them paying 7 or 8% interest on loans they had to take out to cover the damage, they're now paying the state of Vermont 1 or 1.5% of interest, so saving them millions of dollars. But in those conversations, we realized that we need to develop a longer-term capital source for wastewater treatment facilities. And so we've been involved in the conversations, not directly with our office. We've been supportive of A&R and Secretary Julie Moore, trying to get as much of the wastewater money as possible, because that's a good source of funds for a whole host of climate resiliency work, which I would put wastewater into as well.
I can add to that as far as for the question asked. I know in the Biden bill that we had in the capital bill, we had about $257 million worth of wastewater dollars monies, and some of that was $10 to $1 and $14 to $1. So all we had to do was find the match money. So we've made sure that we've had those match monies available. I know we worked in, I think we worked with your office as well. Senate Appropriations actually set up a special fund to make sure that we didn't burn through those dollars and kept them in a private account. So when we access those funds, they were available. Are the grants available for affordable senior housing?
Yeah, so, one of the first projects we invested in was a project in Virginia that was focused on senior housing. That's from our office. Now, I think as a state, we need to do a lot more, again, strategically to focus on senior housing. This one in Virginia will add 65 new units of low and middle income assisted living. And again, what we think will benefit there is not just that we'll have 65 new units of housing, but that people will be moving from homes all around Addison County into this assisted living facility in Virginia. So it frees up their homes throughout the county for young families and others to live in. And one of the reasons I say we need to focus on senior housing is, we have this mismatch between supply and demand in our state a bit, and it's happening elsewhere too. But there was a survey done by MIT that said over 50 million bedrooms go unused every night across the United States, 50 million bedrooms. So Vermont's proportion of that would be about 100,000 bedrooms going unused every night. And I think the vast majority of those bedrooms are individuals that are living in larger homes, and it might just be a single person now, or it might just be 2 people. I think of my parents, they have a 4-bedroom home and they've moved down to the first floor, so all 4 of their bedrooms are unused every night. And I'm sure there's a lot of homes across Vermont like that. So if you can better match their needs to their living conditions, then we will free up a lot of housing in our state. So I think it's got to be one of our strategic initiatives. Beyond our money that we've sort of tried to have an emphasis on senior housing, I don't know if there's other grant programs available, but if you're trying to talk about it here in the city of Newport, then talking to Cathedral Square, which operates in Chittenden County, would be a great resource.
I don't think you've heard this question this year yet, but why are school taxes increased all over the state?
Yeah. So there's a lot of reasons, right? I think the number one reason is the extra burden that came from the pandemic. So kids didn't learn very well when they weren't in school. Fortunately in Vermont, we didn't have a lot of remote learning. We were able to generally get kids back in school by September of 2020. I remember Dr. Fauci coming, not physically to Vermont, but on the TV and saying Vermont was better prepared than anywhere else in the country to reopen its schools, and that proved to be the case. But there were still periods of having to go remote for periods of time. When cases got high, individual schools had to go remote. Kids were wearing masks. They couldn't hear the teacher as well. There was behavioral issues because there was a lot of stress on kids generally at home. And there was a lot of federal dollars to try to supplement school budgets to try to bring on extra resources to handle this growing burden that people are seeing in schools. And there's also almost social work type burden also being seen in schools. And a lot of that federal money has gone away, but the need of the students hasn't gone away. So I think a lot of school districts, this is not universal, but a lot of school districts look to fill those gaps through, you know, their local budgets. So that's one. Another one is healthcare costs have been continuing to rise at really, you know, probably it's fair to describe it as unsustainable rates. So that's a significant cost driver with all the teachers and staff that are in our public education system. Another one is the aging infrastructure of our buildings. You know, our school buildings are getting older and they have come to the end of their useful life, so there's been a lot of deferred maintenance on them, and boilers breaking, and roofs go, and floors need to be replaced, and there's been a lot of expense for that physical school infrastructure as well. So that, I think those are some of the major cost drivers for education taxes. Now there's, you know, we need to talk about the solutions to those too, and I think, you know, I don't know if anyone's ever tried to understand the funding formula, but it's very complicated just to, you know, be as generous as it possibly can be. And, you know, more simplifying that funding formula so folks that are voting on their budget understand what impact it has on property taxes, I think is critical. We always talk about what's the system that we want as well, and I think we need to be thinking about elementary schools closer to home. We need to be thinking about regional middle schools and regional high schools. When kids are young and can't travel as well, it's better to be taught closer to your home. But once you start to get older and you need to have more services, you need to have more friends, you need to have more extracurriculars and more sports, you kind of need larger schools to be able to provide those kind of services. And I think if we have that as an educational focus, there'll be administrative savings that come with that as well. And I want to be clear because I think oftentimes the conversation is misguided. Folks always say, well, you know, the small schools need to consolidate, right? That's sort of the easy thing that people go to. And I think if you look at Chittenden County, you could say, well, maybe consolidation should start here in our most urban area. Because, you know, I live in Winooski, we have a high school in Burlington, high school in South Burlington, one in Milton, one in Colchester, one in Essex. There are a lot of schools right in that area. So I think we have to start thinking more regionally. I don't mean that any particular part of the state, I mean that overall. Particularly for high school and middle school. And that's another cost driver, and you know, there's a lot more things to talk about on that, but these are hard conversations to have.
We have a child care tax that's going to hit July 1st.
Yeah.
Could you spend a little time on how that should help child care in the state of Vermont?
Yeah, so it's kind of like housing. So Russ is talking about it's about $100 million payroll tax, I believe, that will start on July 1st. So child care was passed a year ago or over a year ago, but the collection of that payroll tax was delayed until this July. So the goal is sort of twofold. One is to make child care less expensive for families, so it's a smaller percentage of their household budget. So that's one goal. The other goal is to expand the number of child care slots so that there's more child care available, and by expanding child care availability, they'll also bring down the cost as well, sort of a classic supply and demand question. So the payments that are going out, the monies that are going to be collected, will be payments going out to families to help them have lower household budgets that go toward child care. So bringing down their cost of child care and making sure that there are livable wages for child care workers as well, so that they can attract workers, they don't get burned out, they don't get flipped every couple of months, and they have to find new people. But I think ultimately what we have to keep our eye on as policymakers across the state is, are we expanding the number of child care slots? Are child care centers able to increase the slots in their child care center, and or are new child care centers coming about? Because ultimately that's what we need to have happen, is we need more child care slots. So we need to keep a close eye on that to make sure that policy, in my opinion, is working as intended.
Madam Mayor, we are for questions. Do you have another part that you'd like to go on to?
I do. I love this guy. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
So I also want everyone to know that the last panel that we're going to have is something that's very important order for there to be community safety, our police force needs to dispel some myths on what they need to keep the city safe. And we will be hearing at the conclusion, so that'll be the last panel. Our council member Charbonneau will be speaking to that, as well as our police chief. And so that is an area that also is very important to me, so please make sure you stay, okay? Because that's going to be, it's the community safety, so we need to pay attention. So, Dave, would you like to lead off here?
Well, Rick's gonna start.
Rick, council member, okay. Are we flipping hats?
Yes.
Okay, he's no longer council.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Rick Chase. I'm the Director of Newport Downtown Development. And there are three of us who are going to speak to that set of questions around long-term economic development strategies for downtown Newport, including the conversation that came up around TIFs, tax increment financing districts. So I just wanted to start with kind of laying the groundwork about what Newport Downtown Development is. This is an organization that's 16 years old. It began under a name many of you will remember, Newport City Renaissance Corporation. And for the last 7 or 8 years, it's operated under the name Newport Downtown Development or Newport City Downtown Development. It is a non-profit partner to the city of Newport. So I just want to make that clear. We are not the city of Newport. We're an independent non-profit, and our mission is to try and drive revitalization and economic growth for downtown Newport. So I came into this job as director almost 3 years ago now. And we have been slowly laying the groundwork to take on the long-term economic development questions that are critically important. I don't think I start a single conversation when I meet someone new in this community that doesn't begin with the words, what about the pit? What are you going to do about the hole? And I just want to say that it is absolutely true that that is a reminder to everyone about just the amount of work that we have before us in Newport. But it's not the only thing we have to think about. We're really trying to think holistically about our entire downtown area and what makes for a healthy, long-term community here. So to that end, back in November, one of our board members, Dave LaForce from Built by Newport, agreed to kick off a new economic development task force of Newport Downtown Development. And we went and asked half a dozen community leaders who are well-known, long-time residents and stakeholders in Newport to serve on this task force. Ellen Stanley from Passumpsic Bank is on that task force. She's here tonight. But it also includes Chris Hamlet from Pick and Shovel. Dave LaForce is chairing the committee. We've got Megan McClure from Farm and Forest Century 21. Dina Gray from Eastside Restaurant. Rick Woodward from the Work Commons and now Green Mountain Natural Foods. Am I missing anybody?
Sarah.
And Sarah Chadwin, our board president for Newport Downtown Development, who is a commercial lending officer at Community National Bank. It is a remarkable group of people who have made a commitment and stuck with it. They've met twice a month, usually for a minimum of 90 minutes every time we meet, to become educated about what it will take. And kind of the way we've done this is we've looked at other communities across the state that we think are worth emulating, like Winooski and St. Albans and South Burlington, and actually we can name St. Johnsbury. There are a number of communities we've looked to, and we've had folks come and talk with us and present to us and help us understand what the different components of a long-term economic development strategy should be. So this afternoon, we want to just bring you folks up to date on the work that we've done so far and what we think the next steps are. But you can expect this to be the first of many conversations that we will have over the next 6 months to a year as we really lay out a clear, concrete strategy for how we deal with the long-term development questions here at Newport. And I'll turn it over to our board chair, our task force chair, Dave LaForce.
Thank you, Rick. Good evening, everybody. I'm Dave LaForce. I call Newport, as stated, furniture company right down the road. Here tonight as well. So as Rick mentioned, our task force has met twice a month since the month of November. And I'd say in that time frame, our task force has met with many municipalities that have done a great job of developing their downtowns. Towns such as St. Albans and South Burlington have been very cooperative in helping us understand what has worked for them and their long-term range plans, and that's been very beneficial to us. Our biggest takeaway from all that work thus far has been that municipalities can't do long-term development without significant public infrastructure development. This allows for private and public sector partnerships that lead to successful outcomes for the future. So when we talk about public infrastructure development, I'm referring to things such as utilities, such as water, sewer, and power, stormwater management, street and sidewalk work, brownfield mitigation, and potential parking solutions to handle long-term economic growth. Fortunately, there are opportunities to achieve this public infrastructure work without passing costs on to the taxpayers. Some of those opportunities include new market tax credits, state and federal tax credits, which Mike discussed about earlier, and for sure, tax incremental financing, which is typically called TIF for short. TIF is definitely one of the tools that we believe will be instrumental in allowing Newport to be successful in the future. There are many details on how TIFs work, and I could go on and on all those details, but you'll get lost in all those details. So I do want to give kind of a simple explanation tonight of what TIF is. So as an example, if Newport needed to install new water and sewer and stormwater infrastructure in order to support a new development building in downtown Newport, because the current city system is too small, Newport would go to the city voters for a bond vote to pay for the infrastructure upgrades. Once the development is completed, a significant portion of the net increase in property tax value of the new building would go towards repaying the bond for a period up to 20 years if required. Once the 20 years is complete and the bond is paid in full, 100% of the net increase in property taxes will go towards the general fund for both the state and the city. The new development grows the grand list and in turn lowers property tax bills for all city residents. So some examples of successes on other municipalities in the state. So St. Albans I mentioned, they were able, with aid of TIF, to grow their grand list by $95 million. Winooski, as Mike mentioned, grew their grand list by $79 million. And most recently, South Burlington, they're in the midst of theirs right now, and their grand list is going to grow by $307 million. So significant upgrades. So there is an application that needs to be done if the city decides to go apply for a TIF district in the state of Vermont. There are some real specific things that we have to explain, and one of them is called the but-for. So as an example, this project would not occur if it were not but for TIF's funds to help the project. And it's a significant application, but we will, we're analyzing that, we're looking at that, and the hope is that we will apply for that and succeed in getting it accepted by the state. A lot of our work for the last several months has been about talking about housing. As everybody knows, housing is a significant issue in not only Newport, but the state. So it's definitely one of our biggest initiatives for downtown Newport. There's a great need for workplace housing. Many employers are having difficulty finding staffing because potential hires cannot find a home in the city of Newport. Many of our locals are also having a hard time finding affordable housing. Our younger workforce that's coming out of our high schools have no affordable options available. There's a great need. Another missing element in Newport is housing for the 55+ age group. There are many in this age group that no longer need a 3 to 4 bedroom home. Unfortunately today there's no alternative but to stay in their current homes forever. Building affordable housing for this age group would allow them to move to smaller spaces, and our inventory would increase for our younger families that need the extra space for their growing families. We know that retail on Main Street America has been very difficult. This is why we feel if we develop housing in the downtown area, it will bring a natural audience to our current and future merchants on Main Street. Add in our tourist audience, and then you'll have an environment where downtown shops can thrive. Newport is a beautiful destination city for both our surrounding communities and our out-of-state guests. We need to build all the incredible assets that we build on, all the beautiful assets we have in the area, and continue forward. Focusing our energies on the long-term economic strategies will pay off by increasing our grand list and assist in making living in Newport affordable in the future. Another important part of the task force work is recommending a firm to the City Council for the creation of an enhanced master plan. There is some great foundational work from prior plans, and our intention is to build off those. It is critical for our future that we have a very detailed plan for the next 10 years that will incorporate all these financial opportunities that we can take. It will be the roadmap for Newport's success. And now I'm going to hand off to Jonathan Delevrier so you can kind of explain this initiative in greater detail. Sorry.
What do you have?
Thank you, Dave. So there was just, mention of a recently kind of formed partnership between Newport City Downtown Development and the City of Newport. Back early in 2024, MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, was signed to allow NCDD some grant money that the City of Newport got to really work on strategic planning and put out this request for proposals for a firm to help us kind of identify some key steps. Some of this will be to look at potential development sites within our downtown and provide these recommendations forward to the city so we can help work and prioritize where and what we would like to develop. Second is looking at the airport, which we have another panel later this evening to start looking at that discussion as well. Third, the public infrastructure projects in combination with a TIF application to allow us, again, that partnership, public-private, and to bring some of that funding into Newport to help us with those projects. Again, these are going to be coming to the City Council, most likely in the June meeting, so please see the city's website, take a look at kind of what's coming down the pipeline. We encourage you to get involved and kind of help us form these decisions with the council. Again, partnerships are key, and we just really appreciate everything that NCDD has to offer the city. We couldn't do all this as city staff. That organization has spun off the Economic Development Task Force. They're now spinning off a housing group. So key pieces that help the city to make informed decisions, and we couldn't do all this work just as city staff. So thank you, Rick and your organization, and Dave for all your work. And thank you.
So there are going to be some questions, and I'm going to leave it up to the panelists, and other panelists can jump in too if you'd like, but I'm going to let your panel decide who's going to answer each question.
First question is, Newport's grand list has something like 26% of exempt properties. A healthy percentage between 8 and 10%. Before offering tax exemption, how does the city plan to reduce the 26% of exempt properties?
We'll reread it.
I'll reread it.
It's the grand list because we have so much exempt property.
Newport's grand list has something like 26% of exempt properties, is what the questionnaire is asking or stating. A healthy percentage between 8 to 10%. Before offering tax exemptions, how does the city plan to reduce the 26% of exempt properties?
Take your shot. It's a tough question and it's a plan,
Yeah.
so it's not like.
So I agree, right? And from what I'm hearing, and I've only been here about 2 months, so I'm still learning a lot. But what I'm hearing is Newport does have a lot of untaxable properties. The way that we as a municipality can start having these conversations is with pilot programs, which is payment in lieu of taxes, and it's where we as a municipality work with that organization to set up an agreement where they do pay something. Now, will this equate to what they would have paid kind of on the private side? No. but it does allow us to recoup some of that in the form of an agreement. But I agree, it's tough, right? And I think when we look at the makeup, we can't discourage those types of businesses, right? We can't do that as a municipality, but I think kind of that payment in lieu of taxes helps. But yeah, it's a difficult question, right? And we are the hub, right? So you're seeing the courthouses, you're seeing the hospital system, right? You're seeing some of these important pieces that provide services that we need concentrated in Newport, because we are the hub of the area. And I think we just have to work on these agreements and just plan for it, right? And have the understanding that this is the makeup of our community. Yes, it's not the ideal range, but we do our best to overcome that.
And we did have some of these pilot programs in place, and we're still working on some right now. They're in negotiation. And also, when we plan the development overall, there's going to have to be a balance and a mix, so we can't just be focused on one type of business. So that's why we're investing so much money in a plan.
Let's throw this one out here, maybe for the treasurer. But we often hear how TIFs can help us succeed. We need to know as well how TIFs fail. How Burlington ended up with $1 million owed to the state because of a TIF problem, and how to avoid TIF failures.
Yeah, so the tip does not come without complexity, right? And I think you heard that from Dave and Rick. And I think where Burlington got into trouble with some of that complexity caught up to them. So you need to go in eyes wide open. You need to make sure you're well resourced, that you're willing to spend the money on the accountants and the lawyers and have it all done really well. And that comes down to the confidence and the strength of your city management. So, I think most people are pretty confident in city management across the board, but, you can't cut corners to save costs. That is how you end up into issues. So I think as long as you're willing to put the resources, and they'll obviously think more about what those resources need to be, than most of the communities that have done TIF have not run into those kind of issues.
Can I add something to that?
Yes, please, yeah.
The other thing I want to really be clear about is that TIF is a staged process. So the first thing that happens is we create an application to the state, and we ask for permission to carry out a series of projects over a decade. And the state gives that permission, but then each step of the process, we have to go to the voters in Newport and ask for their permission to create a bond that will pay for that particular project, and that will have the conditions under which that will be repaid. So I want to be clear that there are checks and balances in the system, and one of the ways that we know that at least one or maybe several communities have gotten into trouble is when they haven't done a lot of community input and education along the way, and so they've gotten the TIF district approved, but then haven't been able to get the bonds to go through from with their own voting public. And so one of the things that we're really concerned about, we talk about this at almost every meeting, is how do we make sure that we are describing what's taking place here in language that is understandable and doesn't have any kind of hidden agenda. And we will be looking to create those opportunities over the coming months.
The question is, so if a group of people that didn't have a lot of money but wanted to do something, maybe to have a little bit of a tax break or whatever, is there a way for private citizens to form a group to give donations to the city towards development? And is there a program with the state, or is there any type of way that citizens can give back to the community, maybe get a tax advantage for it, or what have you? So, I don't know. Kind of a.
I mean, what a good example of this is Newport City downtown development. So last year, around the February time frame, I believe, Rick started going out to local businesses to get donations for Newport City downtown development. And that was very successful in forming partnerships and bringing in donations to that group, which has allowed us to do a lot of the work that we've been doing this year. I can't list off all the things that Newport City downtown development did over the course of last year, but it's a lot. And a lot of that came from private donations from a lot of the companies within the city of Newport. I think in all, we raised, with the Carmel Foundation, we raised almost,
$90,000 for, well, no, I'm sorry, $75,000 for our budget,
yeah.
and a $1.2 million on public money being invested in community projects.
Wow.
So, yes, so definitely if there is interest out there in wanting to help and donating money, definitely contact Newport Downtown Development. Your money is greatly needed and it's doing great work for the community.
Madam Mayor, I think we cleaned up the questions on that section, unless there's more to offer on to the next, or whatever you might like.
You're all good? Okay, so we're going to move on to our Northeast Kingdom International Airport Task Force. And I'm going to let Sam come up here and start off and bring up our panel. Excited to see you.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. A couple months ago, Dave and Rick and I had a cup of coffee before I was here to discuss the development initiative that they're so ably moving forward. Coincidental to that meeting and the airport existence, the airport committee, which I have a few gentlemen here who I'll introduce in a second. The spirit at the airport was one of, we've got a great economic development plan that the state has produced that can bring economic energy to the region. And by partnering with Rick and the Newport group, there's no question that the Newport International Airport can become a true economic driver for not only Newport City, but all of Orleans County. I'd like to introduce a couple of folks here. Dan Wadman is a fixed-base operator, has been at the airport for many years, does a wonderful job. At the Eclipse, how many planes did you have?
Just shy of 100.
100 airplanes, a few jets, and what, 400 people?
Closer to 500.
Scott Winnick and Dr. Nate Sims are two of the most passionate private aviators that I've ever met. And we're here to talk a little bit about some of the things that the private aviation community encounters at the airport that need fixing. One of the biggest things that I know Dave feels and Rick feels is that the Canadian market is an under-realized opportunity. We talk the talk, but we don't walk the walk. And there are international opportunities at the airport that require cooperative efforts on behalf of the city, on behalf of the airport committee, and that's a big objective. I think you probably saw when you came in a map of the McFarland-Johnson study. It's very difficult to read because it's small type, but go home and get a magnifying glass and take a look at it. That's the state's plan. And the objective at the airport, you'll see things like the new terminal that we think is going to be built this year. There are warehouses to be constructed in the future to meet the needs of potential aviation businesses that might want to come here. There are more private hangars, a host of things that are in the airport. In 2015-16, that runway was expanded and over $20 million was invested in the airport to make it truly physically capable of growing and expanding. I'd like to ask Scott to come up and talk a little bit about some of the peculiarities that the airport has, in the sense that you as a private aviator, you can elaborate on what that is.
Well,
rated pilot and a commercial pilot. I've been flying out of the airport at Newport for about 20 years and spending a lot of time there, mostly in the last 10. Here's an interesting thing. If you're not a pilot and you don't understand this, pilots like to get together with non-pilots and other pilots, have cookouts, car shows, airplane shows, static demonstrations, air shows on occasion. Some of you may have been out to the airport and seen some of these over the years. A lot of that has slid down, and we don't do it as often, partly because of what happened after 2001. We had a lack of customer service here at the airport, so half our community was shut off. People can't fly from Canada into Newport easily. Customs is an issue. So for example, if one of us wanted to fly up to Sherbrooke or go visit an air show just over the border, there's a fellow named George Weller, who many of you know has an airport up there. He has a great air gathering every fall in September. Has an ice gathering on the lake when it's safe in the winter. And you can't do that safely as a private pilot because you fly there, you can handle the Canadian customs. They make quite an effort to let you check in at that airport when you land in. You can just make a phone call and they'll say, you're fine. They'll give you a number and that's the end of it. 99% of the time, that's the way it works. The United States was supposed to reciprocate with that. It didn't happen. So when you leave there, you have to fly in your single-engine airplane over the runway, over the mountains, the Green Mountains, all the way to Burlington. Fly right over Newport. You might even be able to look down and see it through a cloud if you get good eyes. Clear customs, and then fly back. And that's insane. That doesn't help the communities across the border meld together in the way that they really should. That's simply, there are large plans out at the airport for terminals, for commercial service, for all kinds of things that other people can talk to more eloquently than I can. But to be able to connect these communities again, there are two things that really have to happen that will just make things at the airport move ahead. One is this customs issue that I've been mentioning. And that's simple. We have customs at the dock all the time. You can go up Lake Memphremagog, come around, and you can get customs service there, but for some reason at the airport it's an issue. So that's one thing. The other thing is to really amp up how commercial people, commercial jets in fact, use the airport. You have to have good approaches. And the FAA's done a great job. They've given us a terrific approach to one of the runways coming from the south. That's runway 36. They call it out. It's runway 36 heading north. It's got a really good instrument approach. You can get down really low. Jets can use it. The trouble is, if the wind is in the wrong direction, they have to circle, once they've broken down out of the clouds, circle around and land on 1/8. That circling maneuver is extremely dangerous. And most companies and corporate pilots are forbidden by their company from doing that. It's just a rule that they have to fly in. So Dan has been selling, he runs the FBO, so he runs the fuel services, the maintenance shops there at the airport under Lakeview Aviation. And he can tell you how much not having that facility to come in from the opposite direction, so to come in from 1/8, from the Canadian side and come right down onto the runway without having to circle to another runway to land, cut down. And people, companies like, I believe it's Mission in particular, they just dropped us at Newport. Dan was selling thousands of gallons a year of fuel to that company. Go on. Why? Because the FAA hadn't gotten that approval through. So anytime we could put pressure on from the political side in Washington and put pressure on customs, again, that's more of a federal issue than anything else. It'd be really helpful. So that's just from a pilot's point of view, the simple, really easy, cheap things to do. Not building a terminal, it's not going to cost $10 million. It's not going to cost anything to really do that and then bring that kind of vitality back into the airport. That would be a really important thing. Just one last point. Vermont's the only state that doesn't have that kind of service. Maine does, New Hampshire does, New York does, all around us, small airports get customs service. The airport in Newport is supposed to be a designated entry point. I won't bore you with all the technology, but the terms and the acronyms, but they're supposed to be, but it's at the discretion of Customs. And for 20 years, they've been saying, no, go to Burlington. So that's what we do. But simple, real, not complicated, not as complicated as downtown development corporation trying to get grants and complicated issues like that. This is real simple blocking and tackling. And if we can get some support to do that, it'll be a big help. Thank you.
Thank you.
How much money do you want from the Newport taxpayer?
So I just, if you could be so kind as to write down your questions and then we'll come to them individually. I appreciate it.
Some of you in the audience might remember, or you have family members that might remember, that there was commercial aviation once upon a time in Newport Airport. And Dr. Sims is going to talk a little bit about how to bring that back. And Nate? One thing I should mention, Customs and Immigration has agreed to meet with the airport committee to discuss what Scott was pointing out as an important issue, and that meeting will be forthcoming relatively soon.
Hi, everybody. My name is Matt Sims. I grew up in Burlington, right next to the Burlington Airport, so I do hear a lot about airports and see how they're powered to be economic engines for the region. I just want to say like three things about this airport. It's a terrific airport. It's actually the second longest runway in the state after Burlington, and it's 1 foot longer than Brooklyn after the $20 million that was expended by the government to lengthen the runway by. But in addition to that, it has enormous geographic advantages. This airport is on top of a hill and it's well swept by the wind. So whereas Montpelier might be down in fog for 3 or 4 hours each morning at certain times of the year, this airport is almost never fogged in. In addition, the services the state provides in terms of keeping that runway absolutely clear and dry, even right after snowstorms, means it is now a year-round airport, and I can speak to that because I'm in and out like once or twice a week. I have jobs in Boston and I have a job here. Just for amusement, I want to point out the power of airports that connect to distant places. This airport has been served by Northern Airways and Northeast Airlines, and actually have a copy of the schedule for 1958. You could get to Boston from Newport for $19.30. You can get to LaGuardia Airport in New York for $26.15. This was summer service from June 15th to September 15th in DC-3. And on the way to LaGuardia, you left Newport at 2:05 p.m., you landed in Montpelier, landed at Springfield, Mass., and landed in Hartford, and then you went to LaGuardia. So the question arises, what would it take to get back airline service here? And everybody would think of Cape Air, which provides essential air service to, Rutland, Lebanon, Saranac Lake, and I think Lake Placid, or at least Saranac. The problem with essential air service is it is heavily subsidized by the government. I think that they're not growing it, and each airport has to be something like 70 miles away from an airport that has commercial airline service. And despite the Green Mountains, we're only 40 miles, air miles away from Burlington. And so my dream would be that on and Bruce McFarlane points out that there's 250,000 people at least in the Sherbrooke area. And if the customs work, and if we could persuade Cape Air or one of the other airlines to begin service to Burlington or White Plains or LaGuardia, there's certainly a large population base to support it. It would be great, however, if we could maybe start that process by creating a on-demand charter service here. And that might seem far-fetched, but take Rockland, Maine, which has airline service to Cape Air, but there's a local charter called Penobscot Air that can take somebody who's landed at Rockland and bring them to any of the islands or the other parts of Maine. And so that is a dream that I, continue to hope that all of this will come together for our airport.
Thank you.
I'll add, as far as on the state level, I'm on transportation as well, and we do a lot with the airports. And we have a question about what would Newport's taxpayer be required to do as far as upgrades up there, and the answer would be nothing. It would be on the state and federal level. One of the things that I've been very happy about is that, as the panelists have said before, the state went around to all the airports and identified sites to make them Act 250 ready. They've done the basic permitting so that if companies wanted to come in and to build a business up there that would be supported by air, the legwork of the Act 250 permit has been done, and it should make them easier to bring a project to market faster. The other is that I'm in hopes of, yes, and that new terminal is supposed to break new ground this year. I'm hoping that once that new terminal is there, maybe we can do with what we can have a better facility there to have better access, and maybe convince the feds that they need to have people there to be able to make it easier so you don't have to fly around the world to go from one to the other. I know George Waller very well, and I know he brought that up as well. It's just hard to go back and forth between the two boards and all. Yes?
I just want to point out that back in the 1970s, I think Newport sold that airport for $1 to the state. So I think they've gotten their money's worth already. And the $20 million that was spent up there, the lion's share of that, I don't know the exact percentage, but it's probably in excess of 75% of that, was federal money that came from the FAA. If not all of it, they might be. So that's not an expense to Newport. That should be a calling card for Newport. And that's what we're trying to encourage. And, by the way, that's an invitation to any of you who want to come up there and hang out.
I think we've heard a lot tonight about investment from Mike, and a lot about it. And I can tell you that the state does a lot of investments in their airports, probably not as much as Mr. Godwin would like, but they're not money makers for the state, but the state is forward-thinking enough to realize what these airports do, or what the potential of these airports can do. So when you have a runway that's capable as far as what Newport is, and I have friends of mine that fly out of Rutland on Cape Air, and they're lovely. The reliability sometimes a little bit of concern as far as because of the type of aircraft that are flying in there, but they're using those connectors to fly everywhere in the world, and I really love that service. So I'm in hopes that once we get that new facility in there, that maybe we can see some further services come in. Because as of right now, as Dan will tell you, I've been up there before, what we have to offer them right now when they come in is not much. And Dan's made miracles out of what he's had up there to work with, and hopefully this new terminal will make a lot of difference.
Just to reiterate, there's 500,000 people within an hour of this building.
Yep.
They're mostly to the north.
Yep.
So a tremendous market, much greater market than Rutland, quite honestly. One other thing I'd like to mention is that the committee is working on a 501c3 designation. One of the things that will hope to benefit is our career center. There are a number of students that we've surveyed that would like to become pilots, like to learn to fly. There's a number of students who would like to become aviation mechanics, and we're hoping through the committee and with Dan's guidance that a youth learn to fly and a youth aviation mechanics program can be facilitate it, so.
So while you're there, the question is, are there any programs planned for training new pilots at Newport Airport, flight school?
I'll let Dan answer that.
Thank you, Dan.
Now, for those who don't know me, my name's Dan Garland. I own and operate Lakeview Aviation, 21 years to be exact now. We've seen the airport grow from 4,000 feet to 5,302 feet, 3 feet. So my 5-year plan has seen it expand went to 10, 12 years. It's been really rewarding. I've met with a lot of nice people, air shows, flight school, I started that. Got 5 aircraft, and then the aircraft rentals. We take care of 55 aircraft, and my son's my mechanic. So we do that quite well. We've had regulars. Everybody knows working with him, they don't, see, it's not easy. What else I could add to that?
You have the ability, if somebody wants to learn how to fly, you have people there.
Oh yeah, we got flight instructors. Oh yeah, we got all that. That's not a problem. And winter time is kind of a bear. It's kind of hard to fly, so we don't fly in the winter time as much. But, yeah.
Maybe just a comment about, I'm an airline transport pilot, a rated pilot, been flying for 53 years, and I've flown in a lot of different places. Training in some of these urban areas is incredibly stressful because of the traffic and the air traffic control. Up here, it's so ideal for training because there's less going on, but there's plenty of instrument approaches, and I think that it's just important to recognize there's a dire shortage of pilots in the next 20 years, and this is an ideal place to learn. And if anybody thinks this is too far north to have a flight school, remember one of the most successful flight schools in the world is in Fargo, North Dakota, where in March, a windsock is a 6-foot length of chain. Don't think this isn't an ideal place for a major flight training program with just the investment and the housing necessary to support. In fact, we talked a little bit about JP facilities in the summer. So there's great ideas brewing. We just have to pull them together.
The reporter, Chris Roy, would like to talk at the end about for Approachway 18 that was referenced, so we'd like some more information about that. We won't take the time up here to have that, but if they have the other approachway, that would be nice. And fair question. I mean, we have a large landfill that's next to this. Does that affect the approach? Does that affect the operation of the airway, the airport anyway?
No, not at all. The Casella is invited to have bird management. The USDA created 2 full-time positions to defer any wildlife away from the airfield. Rarely have an issue at all.
Just some comments about from the other one. Again, a lot we talked about. Very exciting. I think she might have been a stewardess at one time. Maybe she's left. But Heather was a stewardess at one time. But very excited about the prospects of what can happen up in Newport. And then we have another question and more comments as much as anything. Maybe we need to write our senators in D.C. and in the state and push them harder as far as to get a better plan and proposals up there to make this a more viable airport or address some of the concerns that have been addressed here tonight. So, yes, sir.
That makes perfect sense, but to think that you need a 3,000 square foot building, to have custom service is sort of a non-starter. Look what we have at the dock down there. I mean, there's a phone, you call, the guy shows up, clears you in, you're done.
Maybe that might entice a little bit more though.
It doesn't have to be that big.
But maybe it might. But I hear you.
But that's the administrative answer that we get as the pushback. No, we need a 3,000 foot building with bars on the windows and men's and women's bathrooms separated. Yeah.
Well, we have that, and they start getting pushback. I guess we have more to go with. So. Anything Anything else?
Nope, just wanted to put it out there, you mentioned the school career center. I do a shadow program. We do the can at people that work in the shop, and I had one, Evan, he works for me now, and he does work every weekend, and he came from the career center. He's been with me 2.5 years now, so that's, we've got another one, Evan, Ethan is on another one that's starting it.
I met a lady, a young lady the other day, coming into our transportation committee from the Civil Air Patrol. And she was very, very active, really. I mean, they had 3 young individuals there. And her involvement with the Civil Air Patrol was because she wanted to be an aircraft mechanic. And that gave her the passion to get there, so that was very exciting to see. Good. Madam Mayor?
Thank you. So next, I'm going to ask our police chief to lead off, and then I'm going to ask our council member to, when the police chief is done, to speak as well and talk about it. Because I'm passionate about this, so pay attention. Go for it.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Travis Bingham. I'm the chief here at Newport. So I'm just gonna, I think most of you are familiar with the conversation that's kind of started around the spatial needs for the police department. I've been here for almost 20 years now, and we have certainly upfitted the current police department to fit our needs. We are getting to the point now where we are, I don't want to say running over each other in the PD, but we're kind of running over each other and running out of space. For those that aren't aware, the police department is located right there in this building. And as you know, this building is also the home of the municipal offices and other city events that happen in this area right here. I don't think you find many police departments throughout the state that are intermingled with public spaces and open offices for various reasons. I had this thought since I became chief 4 years ago of, how can we expand, how can we find a new location, how can we do all this, right? And it's kind of been a pipe dream of mine, but I think the reality is coming more and more to fruition as every day comes on. It seems like there's something that comes to my mind of like, oh my gosh, how are we functioning in the space that we have now? Shortly after the mayor came on board, I took her around, did a tour of the police department, showed her kind of the operations and how it works and what we have for space. And I did the same with the new city manager when he came on board. We just kind of pointed out some of the deficiencies. So the main reason for me is the security and safety of the employees, right? Like just the fact that and I don't have to tell you guys this, you all know, but just the fact that we wear this uniform, people don't like us, okay? There's irate people that walk through that front door, not on a daily basis, but on a weekly basis, okay? We can have Play World going on here with 30, 40, 50 kids in here. Senior Center downstairs has a meal every single Wednesday. It's loaded with probably 50 to 60 seniors. It worries me, right? Like I've had people smash the front lobby door. I've had people go downstairs, take the fire extinguisher off the wall and hose down the downstairs fire extinguisher. I've had people come up, interrupt meetings that are happening, city functional meetings. And those are just a few examples. And then of course we've had an extreme instance where people bring a weapon into the building and it's the worst case scenario. That has happened here. So those are some of the things that we're just trying to point out. And yes, we've updated the space that we have now. Is it perfect? No, not by any means. That loud noise that you guys heard over here during the middle of the panel presentation, our garage is located right below this. We have 6 cruisers, and we're able to fit 4 in there, but that means we can only get 1 out at a time. It's not very functional when you have an emergency situation and you're trying to navigate around poles downstairs, or if there's no parking, and it happens to be a Wednesday. I don't know if anyone's been here on a Wednesday during the day, and it's awesome that they have these functions going on, but you can't find a parking space anywhere, right? So we're parking vehicles down at the lower lot, having to leave the office, go down. It works, but it doesn't work. The basketball leagues, right? Like you can all hear how loud this gym floor is right now. Our interview room is located downstairs, okay? So we have somebody in custody, we're trying to interview them, you can't. Like we literally have to leave the building, go outside and interview them. We've had wrestling events up here, and the same deal. We have somebody in custody downstairs, the victims up here, we're trying to set them up with services, we're trying to interview them so we can put the case together. And we have to literally take them outside so we can actually hear them talk, right? Like it's just not a good way to do business. And then there's the other side of things of people that come to the police don't necessarily want the public knowing their business, right? So there is some privacy, some confidentiality issues that go along with all this stuff. We're spread out on multiple floors, so I call this the main floor because this is where we walk in from Main Street. So all of our PD offices are located on this first floor here. Just beyond that door is the patrol room. So when we ask guys and girls to do their paperwork, right, they're literally sitting on the other side of that door. So if there's something going on in here, they're trying to write a 5-page affidavit with very detailed stuff that's getting presented to the court, to the judge, so later on they can make sure they're putting a good case together. I'm telling you, it's hard to sit in there and do paperwork and all that's going on. The limited space, so I've talked about this a little bit, and I don't know, I'm sure a lot of you maybe have seen the NEK-TV that we were on about a week ago. But the limited office space, I have my own office in there. The sergeants each have an office. One shares with the detective, and then the patrol room is just an open area with 2 workstations at it for the guys to work at. The evidence room located downstairs, small, right? We have a ton of evidence. Like that space is literally full right now. We try to purge it as much as we can, but we're getting to the point now where we have to hang on to some of this stuff forever, right? So we don't have a space to hang on to some of this stuff. I talked about backpacking cruisers out here. A complete nightmare. I'd be more than happy to show anybody the setup down there if you want, and I think you'd probably laugh. Employee parking not secured. This is no joke. Not even a week and a half ago, one of our officers' vehicles was vandalized as it was parked out back from an individual that we're very familiar with, that we deal with all the time. Shouldn't have to park the vehicle in the public parking lot and worry about people walking by and keying the side of your car, right? Like, it was definitely pointed and targeted, and those are the kinds of things we're talking about. Storage for equipment. We don't have any space to store all of our equipment in one spot, so if we got to deploy something quickly or resources quickly, I have to go over to Public Works and get something. I have to go to the water tower and get something. I have to go to wastewater and get something. Not everything's located in one central location, so you can see how that can maybe hinder emergency response when time is of the essence for the most part. Storage of seized vehicles. We seize a ton of vehicles when we're doing our drug investigation cases. If we make a car stop and we have to seize a vehicle, right now I have 3 vehicles that are sitting at the Sheriff's Department because I have no place to store them. Now when I say store them, if we are seizing a vehicle for a criminal investigation, we have to be in a secure parking area, which means a fence, a locked gate, all that. I don't have access to any of that right now, so I have to rely on sheriffs, which they're very welcoming and they allow us to do that. I don't like operating that way. I have no ability to host trainings, right? Like there's a ton of trainings that we can host. I'm always sending people to training, so we have to travel to go to training all the time. I have no place to have people come to my office. I can't have a meeting in my own office because I don't have the spatial needs that would require to have like a professional meeting for people and chiefs around the state to come to. So I went through a lot. I'm sure you have questions. I know this conversation has happened prior to me being chief here, but I think it's a good conversation piece. There's a lot of good stuff happening tonight that I heard about. If Newport's going to thrive and be the economic development that I see, like we're going to have to grow too. And with that, we're going to have to be able to have the right space and right needs to fit the department so we can serve everybody appropriately. I'll leave it at that for now. I'm sure there is questions and be more than happy to answer any questions. And if you don't think of them tonight, feel free to shoot me an email, stop by. I will show you what I'm talking about with some of these deficiencies that I mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I ask Councilmember Charbonneau to come up, I do want to let you know that I have my mayor's hours here, and several times the chief came up because people would just walk in, and I didn't know who the people were, of course, because it's open mayor's hours, but the chief did, and he would escort people down. The way it's structured here, it works because the chief makes one. But we have space, we're developing, we're expanding, and so it's time to be serious about the people who are taking care of our community. Councilmember. Thank you very much for doing this, really.
Just let me introduce myself. I'm Kevin Charno. I'm a member of the council. I also have the privilege of working with the state police coming up here in 1988. In 1988, Newport Police was here in this building. Border Patrol was above New Pride Customs, and the state police was in that little branch right near the Elks Club. Now, Border Patrol has a new building, the state police has a new building, the Newport Police is still in the same building. The difference being, Chief DeSanto realized the need for consolidated dispatch within the county. The state had slowly withdrawn dispatch, and now it's to 2 call centers. Is that correct, Chief?
Yes.
And they really don't know the counties as well as a localized dispatch. So when he talks about the police department growing, they have 1 or 2 more officers in the last 10 or 15 years, but their dispatch has grown to service the various agencies. As a result, they are going to need a secure place for the dispatch. They're going to need a building that's not fragmented, such as this. Some of the things that they realize, we need a place, separate building, is that it would be secure, would be police only. They could use it for planning of large events. I don't know if anybody remembers the Fish concert.
That brings back a twitcher.
But that involved a lot of planning, and that's where you would like to have a dedicated building for that. The one concern I've heard is that people like to have the police department on Main Street. They feel a need to have, the department right here. I grew up in Burlington, so a little used to that place. Years back, they had their police department on South Winooski Avenue, which is right on the edge of downtown. And the same thing, people were saying, oh, it's great, the police is there, they'll be downtown. They moved to Battery Park, which is at the end of North Avenue. It's right on the edge of the city. It's not terribly far from downtown, but it's about a mile. It hasn't affected the police presence in downtown at all. If anything, there are more police officers there rather than sitting in the police station waiting to go to downtown. They're directed to be at that location. If you, I don't know if they still do since COVID, but it used to be you would see cruisers parked at one at the head of Church Street and one down at the lower end. Those were the officers, and that was their patrol area. So, I think, you know, when Newport moves, you're going to see actually more police officers in downtown. And it's not a question if they'll move, it's going to happen. Newport is growing. We're going to need the police department to catch up and grow with Newport. And it takes them a triple amount of time to get an officer trained and on the street. We have been very fortunate. We have a good department, a lot of community support. I think we got to look at that.
One of the questions was that would the city's officers or the people within this building working for the capacity of the city other than the police station, could they use more space within the building in itself?
Yes is the answer to that. However, I think it goes back to what I said, like having a police department intermingled with a public facility is just not a good way to do operations. People that are coming to the police department shouldn't have access beyond the lobby door unless they're escorted by a police officer. And with our layout that we have, like anybody, I came here 2 Saturdays ago to do some work in the office. The front door was propped open, the back door was propped open, there was a birthday party downstairs, a birthday party upstairs, right? Anybody can get in here at that point and go anywhere. Like, that is a huge safety issue. And I said it before, people don't like us just for who we are. They could come down, our officers have a locker room downstairs, they can lay in wait, they can do whatever. It's just not a good setup. So sharing it with the public, I don't love the idea.
Okay. No, I said that wrong. I meant to say it in this way. If you were to move out, would the city find, is the city pressed for space as well? I'm sure the answer to that question is yes. If you were to vacate, that the city could find a lot of use for the space that you're in right now. That they probably outgrow the space as well. With you not being here, that would allow them more room and to effectively do their job more. Maybe Jim Johnson has the answer or something like that. But I'm sure that this is a tight building for everybody and extra space would be appreciated for everybody should be considered.
And that is part of the conversation of the development going forward. The key right now is that our police and our council member are hitting right on the head, as well as our police chief. We need space for them where they can be a department and actually control that space for themselves and then reach out and take care of their community.
Mayor, I think we're through the question.
Is that it?
Kevin,
One last thing.
Sure.
The state has new regulations in the last couple of years, and one of them was to have social workers with each police department. And Newport is fortunate to have it. What they didn't also include was that person needs a separate office to be able to interview people and talk to them.
Is the Armory a viable location being asked?
Yes. So we believe that that is definitely one of the buildings that we should be looking at. There are other options, but we did take a tour, and that one is a definite option.
And there are discussions in the state as far as with that as well. That's what we would say about that.
Any other questions, or?
We have it, man.
Wow, well, I want you to know we do these community forums because we're trying our best to hear from you, and we're trying our best to get every topic that we discuss out to you. So, thank you for coming. Thank you to our panel. Oh my goodness. Thank you. Thank you to our city manager. our treasurer